But man, like pool, the opposite happened. I was injured, so I couldn't do Taekwondo when I got obsessed with pool. And I started playing, and I watched these guys play that were really good, and I just remember thinking, how the fuck is it possible to not miss for a whole game? You know what I mean? Like, you guy ran out the whole table, and then I became obsessed with it.
You just had to be able to do that.
I had to be able to. I had to be able to run out. Well, I wouldn't be happy until I figured out how to break and run out. But that's just, you know, that's a fun thing.
By the way?
You get good at pool?
To be able to break and run out.
It took a couple of years, I think.
A couple of years?
I think it took probably 2 years of me, like, really playing all the time before I could consistently break and run out.
That takes real discipline, man.
Or obsession.
Obsession, yeah, but that leads to that discipline, though.
Yeah.
The discipline is really...
I've always had weird discipline. I have much more discipline for things now as a grown man than I did when I was young. When I was young, I had very little discipline, but I had a lot of obsession.
Does being a father contribute to that?
Yeah. You feel like you have more responsibilities. Also, I understand that with discipline comes reward. You know, that, you know, you appreciate things that you do and manifest and create because you had to work hard to do them, because you forced yourself to work when you didn't want to. You're like, well, look, I didn't want to work, but bam, look what happened because of that. I got this now. I accomplished that. I wrote that. You know, there it is. It's the proof that you have to discipline yourself. Because when I was young, like with Taekwondo and those things, it was only about obsession. Like, my discipline was not good. I was not a disciplined person.
Right.
I didn't want to do a bunch of stuff that wasn't fun, but I was so obsessed with getting better at martial arts that it was easy to look disciplined.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense, actually.
But it was all fun to me, so it wasn't really discipline. I was obsessed. You know, there's a difference. As you get older, you understand the rewards of discipline, that it's a good thing. And it's good to also have a certain amount of control at all times over your impulses. And I didn't have any of that when I was young. I was very impulsive. I was a wild motherfucker, you know. I was barely raised. My parents were barely around when I was a kid.
Really?
So, yeah, I grew up doing wild shit, and they never had a fucking clue. They didn't know anything. So I was completely impulsive, you know, by the time I had graduated high school and then was out on my own, living with my friends, you know, by the time, I was like 20 or something like that when I first moved out. When I was living with my friends, we were a bunch of savages. I was living with these other guys that I did Taekwondo with, and we're just fucking wild animals that somehow or another had escaped from the nest and were trying to live like grown-ups. We were like pretending to be grown-ups.
What made you more disciplined, though? Like, you needed to get even better results? Then you're like, I need to become more disciplined? That kind of thing?
That's part of it, yeah. Of writing. I really realized the discipline really came into play with my writing. Like, sometimes I didn't feel like writing, but you have to write, even if you're not... If you're a professional comic, man, you have to write. Like, when I have friends that are professional comics that don't actually sit down and write, and I'm like, you're selling yourself short. Like, oh, I write on stage. I'm like, yeah, I do too. But you got to write. You got to sit down and you got to write. Because if you don't, you're going to have less ideas. You're going to have less things that you've considered. You're going to have less topics to explore. You know, and I talked to a buddy who just writes in the car. He never writes, but he just drives around his car and comes up with ideas. I'm like, all right, that's a method too, but you really should write. Because when you actually sit down and write something, whether it's a pen to a piece of paper or whether it's writing in front of a computer, it takes, like, you work the word strategy. Well, it takes much longer to write the word strategy than it does to consider the concept of strategy.
Right.
So while you're writing it, you're putting more thought and more consideration into things.
You open more doors when you write it down.
Yeah,
for sure.
Sure, for sure.